everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dojo Live, our first episode this week, Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure to be hosting along with America Guerrero today.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those who are on the other side of the world. Hello,
Ex-
everybody.
Exactly. Hello. And of course, we're here to welcome Sterling Douglas, who is the co founder and CEO of Chowly today, the most important person on today's show. Thank you for joining us, Sterling.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation all about food. If you haven't picked that up already by the name of the company, Chowly. And we're going to be talking about tech and restaurants and practical insights for those of you who want to get started. But before we do, we'd love to get to know you a bit more, Sterling. If you could share with us a bit about who you are, your story, your passion, and how that's led up to Chowly. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think that there's always been a couple of things that have always driven me. I'm always been very competitive, always played a lot of sports, but always been incredibly curious. Whether it be the type of video games I played growing up, I love games like Roller Coaster Tycoon and Sim Golf and all these ones where you're kind of managing and creating different things. And there was always kind of this curiosity and this problem solving part of me that was always there. And so, went to college, became an actuary, which for those of you who don't know what an actuary is, it's like a combination of finance and statistics. It's probably one of the nerdiest professions you can go into, but it taught me a lot of really valuable skills after about 2 years doing that and management consulting.
My actual reference
yeah,
would
of course.
be, what's that? Along Came Polly or something? The Ben
Yeah,
Stiller
yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Yes, all right. I
Yep.
always
So Ben
reference movies in
Stiller,
our
yep,
shows.
all
So.
about risk assessment. It's a little different than they portrayed in the movie, but great. I was glad the movie existed, so at least people had an idea of what an actuary might be. But had a great job. Had really cool clients I worked on. The work was pretty interesting. But there was always this little question that every project we'd work on would start with, and it'd be kind of, what did we do last time? And we'd take that and we'd iterate, and then we'd kind of deliver that to our clients. And so everything I worked on was kind of a Frankenstein monster. I never got to work on something like really new. And so the problems that we were solving, there was kind of always the same playbook to run. So I basically kind of set out at that point knowing I wanted to start a company and solve different problems. I started a mobile ordering app for bars back in 2014. That company ultimately failed, but after about 6 months led me to the discovery of Chowly back in at the very end of 2015 and early 2016. And about 6-7 years later, here we are. And so that's a little bit about my story and kind of what drove me to become the entrepreneur that I am today.
Awesome. And it definitely sounds like a story, excuse me, of endurance. I love that. So let's talk about Chowly, where you are today. Who is Chowly? What does your company do? And what's the problem that you're solving?
Sure. Chowly's a restaurant technology company. And so we're basically helping restaurants of all sizes adopt new technology, specifically in the off-premise space. If you're a restaurant and you're trying to add different services like Grubhub or Uber Eats or DoorDash, this can actually be a somewhat daunting and complex, addition to your restaurant. And so Chowly basically simplifies that. We make sure all of the systems are connected. We're going to integrate it directly to a restaurant's point of sale. And point of sale is basically how restaurants are run. That's what they run credit cards. That's what stores the menu, prints receipts, and does all that stuff. And so what we're able to do is make sure that the data that lives on Grubhub is the same that lives on the restaurant's point of sale. So that when you as a consumer are ordering food, the menu you're ordering from is accurate. And the order, when you send it into the point of sale, is correct. So you actually get the right food.
Wow. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think, I mean, I used to work in the restaurant industry. It's been a long time. Back when I was in my college days, it's been over 20 years. A lot has changed since then. So it'll be interesting to see what this kind of looks like. So before we get into that, let's introduce the topic of today's show as chosen by you.
Which is making tech accessible for small to mid-sized restaurants. Practical insights into how hopeful entrepreneurs can begin carving a path within the restaurant's tech industry. So please share with us, why do you think topic is important for today's show?
Sure. I think um, one of the more important aspects of running a restaurant today is that technology just plays a huge part in it. Everything from how consumers are ordering food, how they're paying for food, how they're leaving reviews, how restaurants market is now, moved from kind of the old days of, coupons and mailers and leaving flyers on your doors to now all being, digital, SEO driven, and so many different things. And so restaurants are forced to basically bring on this use of technology if they want their businesses to be successful. And most restaurateurs, this isn't something that they grew up with. They got into starting a restaurant because of hospitality. They got into it because they wanted to make great food, provide a great experience. And so adopting this new technology can be really daunting, especially for the small and mid-sized restaurants who don't have, big IT groups or large marketing budgets. And so what Chally really strives to do is make sure that same tech that is powering, large 1,000 location national chains is accessible and available so that your small mom and pop restaurants that we love so much in our neighborhoods can be just as successful and have the same type of interactions with consumers.
I think that makes a really good point. And I guess that makes my first question when it comes to tech and restaurateurs and these mom and pop small restaurants in particular. You as Chowly, is that like one of the first steps that you have to overcome is even convincing restaurateurs that technology is, whether they like it or not, they have to face this new reality? Or are most restaurateurs kind of on board with this and actively searching for ways to increase tech?
No, it's a great question. I think back when we first started in 2015, 2016, we definitely had a lot more of those conversations. Why do I need this? Why do I need, Grubhub? I have my own, customers love coming in. And we saw this transition coming into effect where you saw a larger and larger percentage of orders occurring digitally instead of in person. And you started seeing a larger and larger amount of orders occurring off premise, for delivery or for pickup rather than, on premise and in person. And so you definitely saw this transition occurring. And then COVID hit, and then it was just a mass acceleration. Now it's always I know I need technology. I know it can help my restaurant, but I don't know where to start, or I may not know how, or how do I
Mhm.
use the 10 different systems that I think I need, and try to get them in a way that these restaurateurs can understand.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I know that here in Mexico, well, around the globe, most restaurants started to use this technology because of the pandemic. How do you think that the future will looks like if it wouldn't be for the pandemic situation in terms of technology and restaurants?
I still think that it was going to happen. I mean, you can if you look at a lot of things that were happening in 2019, the year before the pandemic, you were seeing companies like DoorDash and Uber Eats, explode, right? You were seeing I think over $4 billion of venture capital being poured into restaurant technology companies. It was still happening, and it was actually happening at a pretty quick rate. What we saw in COVID was, a very drastic acceleration to, instead of moving quickly and going through all these restaurants, it was in a matter of weeks, every restaurant needed to use it because it was the only way they could stay in business.
For sure. So let's talk a bit more about the technical side of this, the point of sale, and all these integrations that are happening. What are the main problems that companies are facing? You, for example, mentioned 10 different systems. So you came in, I'm guessing, to help sort of streamline this because the way I understand it is traditionally restaurants would have to have this is my device for Uber Eats, this is my device for DoorDash, et cetera, et cetera, and maybe even other things that aren't even coming to my mind. But what are the complications? Really, if we could start at the bad news sort of first, and then shift into what
Sure.
what this is becoming.
If you're a restaurant and you want to sign up for the big marketplaces, right? Well, just take the big three, right? Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub. Each one of them is going to ship you a tablet. On that tablet, that's how you're going to receive orders. That's how you're going to need to make menu changes. So let's say you're running your restaurant, it's busy, you've got a bunch of people, at the door who are wanting to pick up orders or either, order on premise. and then you've got an order comes in on the Uber Eats tablet. Well, you're going to hear a dinging. Now, one of your staff members has to go there, grab that tablet, look at the order, manually enter it into the point of sale so that it fires to the kitchen. Meanwhile, you're making staff on premise wait. And then one of your kitchen, people yells out, "Hey, we're out of, green peppers." Okay, well now I've got to, mark it on my point of sale so that customers here aren't going to be able to order it. Then I got to go to my Uber Eats tablet. I got to 86 it there. Then I got to go to my Grubhub tablet. I got to 86 it there. Then I got to go to my DoorDash tablet. And I got to 86 it there. And it's a really complicated operation to basically keep all of this data, streamlined. Meanwhile, you're still having to run a restaurant, which by itself, without these distractions, is a relatively deceptively difficult business model to do. And so when you get Chowly into place, basically the tablets get put in a drawer, right? Orders come in, they automatically fire to the kitchen. The kitchen knows what they need to make. When you run out of green peppers, you hit it on your point of sale once. It'll automatically update all your platforms to make sure customers aren't ordering something that you're out of. And all of a sudden, what was a really big pain and complicated and had all these funny terms like tablet hell and all these things, that goes away, right? And now you can get back to focusing on making great food and the guests that are right in front of you to provide a good experience with.
Go ahead, America.
Could you share with us how has been the customer loyalty shifted into the age of food delivery apps? Because I have a mom. She doesn't want to have an app on her cell phone. She doesn't want to order in that way. She has this difficulty to start learning about tech. I don't know why, but it's easier. She can spend less time doing this by an app. So how is this customer loyalty transition?
Sure. I mean, on one side of those, I mean, my mom was a little bit resistant. She always liked calling into the restaurant, but then once she got a pretty good experience with Panera Bread app, which is one of her favorite restaurants, she downloaded that one. And then once she got into ordering that, she's like, "Well, DoorDash is actually pretty easy to use, and then I have a lot more restaurants." So I think that you'll see consumer adoption even in some of our older generations as they realize that it becomes easier. But the point that you're bringing up around customer loyalty is also really interesting. And because what ends up happening is, as a restaurant, if a customer orders directly from you, there's no commission, there's no marketing fee. If they order from you through a DoorDash, for example, DoorDash charges a commission fee. They're going to take anywhere between 20 and 30% of the total order size, and that's going to go to DoorDash and be taken away from the restaurant. This is charging for marketing fees, for the delivery fees, and some other things as well. And so restaurants are kind of going through this decision process where I get more orders from DoorDash, but it's a little bit more expensive channel. I can create my own channel, right? Let's say if Kim, you owned your own burrito shop, right? And then it's, Kim's Burritos. I could go to kimsburritos.com and order from it, and then you wouldn't have to pay for that commission fee. So as a restaurant, you have different channels. So the same way a lot of tech companies and a lot of other business are looking at all these different marketing channels, restaurants are now having to do the same thing, and they have to figure out, how much do I invest in this channel, my direct one? How much do I invest in the third parties? How much do I invest in, in Instagram and all these different things? And so it's becoming much more complicated for restaurants, specifically because of that customer loyalty point that you bring up.
Mm-hmm. Is Chowly able to help in terms of consultation, let's say, in terms of business models, where certain restaurants are at, or even where they're located, who their client base is, and offer ideas or even how to set up perhaps your own website? How is that working, or is that maybe what's coming next?
We ourselves, we're not a consulting shop. We're a technology company, but a lot of times we are where restaurants start on kind of their, what we call their digital journey, right? So a restaurant knows they need to adopt technology. They see all the ads for third-party marketplaces, and online ordering, and loyalty, and dispatch, and voice automation, and whatever the new technology is coming out, and they know that they need to do it. And so a lot of times, Chowly is a really great place to start, because we'll work with restaurants, we'll help them get on the third-party marketplaces. That's usually the easiest place for restaurants to start. One, because the third-party marketplaces do make it really easy. They take care of a lot of the work, working with consumers, advertising them, posting menus, and fulfilling the deliveries. And so when we talk about that digital journey for restaurants, a lot of times they start with third parties. Then we're going to start asking them about their first party ordering. How can we how can customers order directly from you? Your loyal ones who are going to do repeat orders. Then we're going to be looking at how can we make your delivery more efficient, right? Should you be bringing on maybe one or two of your own drivers? Should be leveraging national networks? And then when we get kind of really late in that digital journey and we get more complicated, we can talk about virtual restaurants. You have your own brand, but you've got a little extra kitchen capacity. Can we fill that with purely virtual restaurants in there? And so there's kind of this climb that they have to do, and a lot of times Chowly ends up playing a key role, kind of guiding them on, kind of throughout that journey.
No, that's really amazing. So let's talk about Chowly in terms of the restaurateurs and the people that are working with them, right? In terms of like, what would the onboarding experience sort of look like? Is it as easy as turning this on, or what does that look like in terms of your own experience with the interface and user experience of your product?
Yeah, for a restaurant to get onboarded with Chowly or with any technology is actually one of the reasons that we exist in the first place. Because what we found is that it was really hard for a restaurant to start. And so we think about why it was difficult, and there's a number of deeply technical reasons on why getting started with some of this new technology is so difficult. And we think about what the focus has always been on Chowly. And so when we've looked at onboarding restaurants, we basically took the existing model that we saw with every technology company that a restaurant would work with. And we're like, how do we do the opposite of that? How do we make it super, super easy? How do we make it so that a restaurant doesn't really think about it? And so every step of the way, when we thought about onboarding new restaurants, we've always minimized how much work the restaurant actually has to do. And in the early days, there was a lot of work that we had to do. And so it would take over a month to get them live, depending on how complicated their menu was. But the way that we did it was we basically did all of the work. So during that month, we would be looking at their menu, we'd be looking at any duplicates, any spelling errors, any issues that they had, making sure that by the time we were done, when we were posting that menu, it was really clean so that the restaurant didn't have to do a lot of work. And so we've kept that, consistent throughout the whole time of Chowly. The only difference is that 30-day mark has just continually made progress. And so, after a couple of years, we got that down to 3 weeks, and we got it down to 2 weeks, and we got it down to 1 week. Now, when you look at onboarding with Chowly, we have a solid 20% of our restaurants that are up within less than 24 hours, and we can move
Wow.
really, really quick. And most of the restaurants that we're onboarding are getting onboarded within a week or less. And so not only is it requiring them to do very little work, but now it's happening faster and faster. And we're always pushing the envelope on that, to try to get this as quick and as painless as possible for our restaurants.
I really like that sort of reverse engineering approach of like, what should we not do? And then now let's figure out how to make that happen. And in terms of the people who are working with restaurants, those people who are now no longer having to deal with, 4, 5, 6 different tablets and it's all in one point of sale, what does this look like for the employee experience? And then also, how are you seeing this increase the customer experience for restaurants?
Yeah, no, I mean the number one kind of reuse of that time that was previously spent managing tablets ends up going towards more customer face time. If you have a staff member at a restaurant who's running, a register and is dealing with customers in person, sometimes they literally turn their back to those customers so that they can mess with the tablet. Once you get everything integrated, they now get to provide much more undivided attention to the customers that are right there in front of their face. And so you're gonna get a better customer experience. I think the other thing that restaurants look at a ton too is they're seeing a lot of struggles in the labor market and having increased costs. And this is an opportunity for them to actually get cost savings that are going to help that restaurant, potentially make it through, the recession and other kind of like, market related things. And the third thing I'll add is that when restaurant employees go from one restaurant to another, it's a great source of referrals for us because they'll be at one restaurant. They'll see how much easier it is when you have these things integrated, how much better customer experience is. They'll go to another restaurant that doesn't have these things integrated. And like, why aren't you guys using Chowly? Like, this is what we did at the last restaurant. And it provides a much better experience. It's got cost savings, it's got all these great things in it. And that's actually been a way for us to get more restaurants on board.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense, and congratulations. I think it also speaks to just the ease and usability of what you've been able to create. You know, we talked about like the push for loyalty. We talked a little bit about how it's difficult to sort of get the buy-in of older generations, but we've got people, particularly like, you know, the millennials, the Gen Z coming up, who are all about the tech, who are all about ease and personalization. Is Chowly able to make the ordering experience even more personal for the people who are, you know, making these orders? Like, I'm thinking about things. One of the reasons that I am resistant to things like Uber Eats or Grubhub is the ecological component. And so, for example, a lot of times if I do call and decide to have delivery, I'll be like, don't worry about, you know, the plastic forks or the napkins, or I don't need the ketchup packets or whatever it might be. Are these kind of components that we're trying to integrate as well? And I guess on the flip side, alternatively, is even dollar savings, because I don't have to spend money on a plastic fork for that order. Like,
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the third parties have continually made progress on these types of these types of issues, right? So there was a big push. I think this was 2 or 3 years ago, where all the third parties started, making sure to provide that information. So every time you checked out on Grubhub or Uber, there would be a checkbox that says, "I don't need, utensils, napkins, blah blah blah. I have these things at home." This allowed, the restaurant to have cost savings, like you said. This allowed for, less trash end up in landfills. And so what's really cool is that as soon as, those third parties, start pushing for that, we can very quickly get that information translated to the restaurant. And we can work with the different systems that exist in the restaurant to make sure that that information is communicated correctly. Some systems don't really have a spot where you can put that. So we can work with them to basically create an item on whether to include those utensils, or we can put it in special notes section, or we can create, an open item, kind of a dummy item, where we can then add a comment saying, "Please don't include utensils, napkins, etc." And so there's always a lot of opportunities for us to make sure that the goodwill and the good ideas from these companies actually gets executed, because we're the ones that are working with restaurants to make sure operationally they're fulfilling all these different requests.
yeah. The operational component is a curious one too. Like, have you seen in terms of how much less mistakes in ordering and fulfilling orders are happening, like duplicate orders, or, putting the toppings on the burger when you weren't supposed to, and things like that, in terms of like customer satisfaction and just ease of stress and the people who are preparing the food as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge selling point. I mean, you're relying on manual data entry if you're not using integration. And if you're entering 100 orders a day, you can have 95% accuracy. That's like A plus, like that. You think you're doing well. That's 5 orders a day, though, where you might miss a modifier, you might miss an item completely, you might choose the wrong one, you might not want to type out that comment. You could even miss out on allergy information. And so when this is programmatic, when it's automated, there's a one-to-one relationship. If this person put this in on Grubhub, it is getting to the restaurant, it is getting to the staff. And that's going to really cut down on those errors and provide a much better customer experience for sure.
Yes, I have these nightmares when I used to work in this restaurant, and I remember that we had an app. This was during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, and we have the app, and it was a nightmare because the my boss, he thought that, well, with technology will be faster, everything will be faster, but he didn't know that it was like there was no control with the orders that we were getting via the app and the people that we had in front. So he thought that it would be faster, but not. So what would you recommend to those to those bosses that they think that with technology everything will be fixed? Like, there must be a change, but I don't know. What can you share?
Sure. Yeah, it's almost to be careful what you wish for, right? So, restaurateur says, I need more orders, I need to generate more sales, gets on the app. Now he has too many sales, right? And this is going to make it harder for the staff to be able to put these out. It's going to make it, more difficult to balance between our digital customers and our in-person customers. And I think that this comes down to, I think more of it's a baseline, business model tactics. As a business, you have to project how much demand you're going to get. And then you also have to look at how much labor do I have? How much inventory do I have? How can I do on timing? Can I handle, I can handle 20 orders an hour. I can handle 40. What about 60? What about 100? What about 200? And so there's restaurateurs have been really good at this in the past. They typically do this around events. They know that when the Super Bowl is happening, they're going to get a ton of takeout, especially if you're a pizza and wings place. And there's, if you're Valentine's Day, you're going to be getting a lot of reservations if you're a fine dining restaurant. And so restaurateurs are used to being able to balance changes in volume. It's just now everything's digital, right? It's a new medium that they have to make sure that they're keeping an eye out for. And so making sure that they're keeping an eye out for how many orders they're going to get, making sure that they're staffed appropriately, making sure their quote times are up to date, right? If I'm really busy, I'm not going to be able to get this order out in 30 minutes like I usually can. So let's make sure that we update that quote time to 60 minutes. I know I'm going to be busy at dinner time. Let's preset that. And Chowly has tools to help with these types of things as well. But as a restaurateur, you've got to be aware of the volume, and you've got to be looking at all the different metrics that you look at for the rest of your business.
Which I think is something we haven't even touched on yet with Chowly, and that's like the data component, what you're just saying, and being able to set and adjust. So I'm guessing that you're able to spit out some of this data and metrics for the restaurateurs, so then they're able to go in and then adjust and make adjustments and actually be a lot more agile and a lot more flexible. And I think the reliability of it, it's not just going with my gut of maybe what has happened, but what is happening and how has that played out?
No, it's been helpful. We actually released a whole slew of reporting tools this year, and it's been helpful for restaurants to look at them for a number of different reasons. Which of my items are doing the best, right? What are my top 10? What times a day am I doing the most orders? What are my orders per hour? Do my off-premise orders, like am I busiest on my off-premise? Does that also match when I'm busiest on my on-premise? We can also, some restaurants have different prices on different platforms. And so you can even tell a restaurant, what's our average price point for this particular item? Are we selling more at a higher price point to help them basically optimize their menus? And so the data component's huge, and there are an endless amount of use cases on how you can use that data to make your restaurant and your off-premise business much more efficient.
Of course, this is not just about the streamlined point of sale. It's like, hey, I can better staff my place and avoid headaches and nightmares like America was referring to. So,
Valentine's Day.
shivers. So let's talk about this boss component. We're at the final few minutes of our show. So Sterling, I do want to put you on the spot, bringing it back a bit to the co-founder boss idea and the Chowly origin story. What were some kind of early wins for you? What helped you sort of gain momentum, and how has this ultimately impacted the culture that you and your team are building?
Yeah, I can go a lot of directions with that question. I think that there were two things early on in Chowly's journey that were instrumental to our success. One was the kind of just the entrepreneurial spirit of following the problem, right? Because everybody walks in to a particular situation and they have these preconceived notions on how they would solve the problem or what the problem truly is. And a lot of times entrepreneurs will then build that product. But that's actually a really big mistake, because what the entrepreneurs really should be doing is obsessing and hammering these customers with questions. Because what we found out when we were talking to restaurants, right? I built a mobile ordering app, right? This was people in bars to basically order drinks on their phone and have it be brought to their table. And when I talked to restaurants, they kept saying, it has to integrate into the point of sale. This has to integrate into the point of sale. So what I realized is that the problem that they had wasn't going to be solved by the app. The problem that they were really having was just getting data into their point of sale system. That's what led us to even start Chowly. Then once we started Chowly, it was really understanding, all right, why is this so hard? Like, I understand what you want. And if you dig and dig, you'll find these underlying problems. And if you follow the problems, that's how you can actually really build the best products. Our products and our features are not dictated by what, me or my co-founders or our engineers or our product people think we should build. Our product is built by what customers tell us. Customers tell us, like, this is what I need, this is my problem, like, this is what I'm struggling with. And then it's on the entrepreneur to basically try to figure out how to solve those problems, sometimes in very non-obvious ways. And that was really key for us. It was following the problem. It wasn't necessarily like shoving a solution at restaurants. It was constantly asking them what their struggles were and what their challenges were, and then offering and testing solutions to make sure that they worked. And I think that was really a big part. And I think the second part there was just having happy customers. One of our earliest customers, for anyone who's from the Chicago area, Let Us Entertain You. Very, very successful restaurant group in Chicago. They have a slew of different brands that have gone on to be really big. And they were an early client of ours, and it was really they taught us a lot about the restaurant industry and helped really impact and make sure the product that we were building was successful. And then since they were so happy, you can go to other restaurants and they'd be like, well, if it's good enough for Let Us Entertain You, like it's probably good enough for us. And so really focusing on those early clients and making sure that they're so happy that they want to refer others, and making sure that you're following problems and making, I think were two just absolute key steps in the early days for us to be successful.
It's super interesting. And I think the final question I have for you, and then bring it back to this idea of listening to your customers. And in a lot of ways, it sounds like your customers take a mentorship role, even if it's unintentional, right? Not intentionally, but they're mentoring you to be a better entrepreneur, to be and build a better product. And I know that mentorship is something that's incredibly important to you, Sterling, personal level. I think what have you received, I think, the best advice you've received from a mentor, and maybe how that's played out in your life as well?
Man,
and how you pass the torch. How you take that to be a better mentor yourself, I think.
Yeah, man, I don't know if I could pick the best piece of advice. I've gotten a lot of amazing advice over the year. I think that one of the things that I did that was just personally helped me in my career and has certainly helped on Chowly is finding mentors, not just one, but multiple. I mean, look, my dad's been a mentor to me my entire life. But then when I, started my, career as an actuary, I had a manager who was a mentor of mine, and then I was able to find someone on the sales side who helped mentor me, and then I was able to find someone, that was a friend of a friend's uncle who started a company, and so he mentored me for a little bit. And all these things are sometimes they're formal, sometimes they're informal, but you just hop on the phone, you ask questions, you listen to these people you respect, and then you start putting some of the things they say into action, and you start seeing really great results. It just turned into this, like, I just craved mentorship. And what I found is that so many people want to help, and they want to give advice, and they want to help you solve problems, and they want to give this guidance. And so now, I'm 10 years removed from a lot of this. I see a lot of young entrepreneurs, especially in the restaurant tech space, starting up. And I always, take the opportunity. I love talking to entrepreneurs in the space. I talk to them every week, multiple times, so that I can pay it back, because I had a bunch of people who gave me their time and great advice and didn't ask for anything in return. And so I'm forever indebted to those people in the space. And the thing that I can do is try to do the same for the next slew of young entrepreneurs, and try to pass on some of the same things that I learned.
For sure. I think what I'm hearing is be willing to help and be willing to receive help, which I think is sometimes easier said than done, for sure. Well, Sterling, we're actually at the end of our show today, if you can believe it or not. It's been a powerful morning, half an hour of learning from you, learning all about Chowly and how you're making restaurant tech easier and growing. And we look forward to seeing you continue down this successful journey. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you. We'll stick around for just a minute as we go off air. But before we do, we would like to introduce tomorrow's show.
Yes, tomorrow we're going to have our second episode of our AWS segment, which and the topic is going to be about the getaway drug to the cloud. And the question is the tagline. How can the containerization, did I say that correctly, Kim?
Containerization. Yes,
Thank
containers, the gateway drug to the cloud. Yes.
Yeah, you're already using be amped up with the cloud. That is the question. And the guests are going to be Art Chan, Senior Partner Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services, and Gustavo Romero, Principal DevOps Engineer at Tencora, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific.
That's right. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Sterling. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock Pacific. Bye for now.